First Catholic bishop in the United States. He was the cousin of the wealthiest citizen in America, Charles Carroll, the last surviving signer of the Declaration. In 1776, the Continental Congress asked John Carroll to be part of a commission, which included Benjamin Franklin, to enlist the aid of Canada in the cause of the American Revolution. Bishop John Carroll wrote, "Freedom and independence acquired by and cemented with the mingled blood of Protestant and Catholic fellow citizens should be equally enjoyed by all."
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk today here on VCY America. Ladies and gentlemen, this past December 13th, we interviewed Karen Mueller on Crosstalk about a critical case before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, really dealing with the right to treatment for patients, patients' rights. Well, the case is Alan Gale versus Aurora Healthcare Incorporated. And so the questions remain. What authority does a medical power of attorney hold? What are patients' rights when a hospital refuses a standard of care that the patient or his representative request? Well, those oral arguments were heard last Monday before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and today we have the lead attorney representing Alan Gale, who had medical power of attorney for Mr. John Zingsheim, back with us. Her name is Karen Mueller, founder and general counsel for Amos Center for Justice and Liberty. Karen, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me back. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
Very good. And just before we talk about this particular case, as you're well aware, yesterday marked the 50th anniversary of the infamous Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision. We know the Roe decision was negated by the Dobbs decision this past June 24th. A massive March for Life was held in D.C. Counter-protest happened in communities around the nation. Give us your thoughts, though, on this issue and where we are as a nation on this matter of life.
Well, first of all, I would say praise God that the Dobbs decision overruled almost 50 years of killing the unborn. This is a year to celebrate for this decision, and it's also a year to pay attention to what's going on in your state legislature. For Wisconsin, it is Madison that is now ground zero for the fight. We have a 50-year-old statute, or I should say 170-year-old statute, as you know, that our legislature wants to repeal. I believe that statute gives constitutional and civil rights to the unborn in this state, and that is because of the language that says an unborn child is a human being from conception in Wisconsin. And so I would urge your audience in Wisconsin to stand up right now and be heard and not let the legislature repeal this very important protective statute for the unborn.
And we, as you mentioned, Karen, this is in state legislatures around the country. We have a number of people in Minnesota that are listening, and what they are trying to do there to advance death of the preborn is amazing. Lord willing, we'll have a guest later this week pertaining to this, but the battle's happening in many state capitals, and friends, you need to stay abreast of what's going on within your state on this issue. Karen, it was just over a month ago that you were on Crosstalk here and discussing the case that you would be arguing then at that time, before the Wisconsin Supreme Court, Alan Gale versus Aurora Healthcare Incorporated. And we'll talk about the oral arguments, but before we do that, I know we have many new listeners to the program or those who didn't catch that broadcast or it's kind of fuzzy in their mind. Just give us a brief overview of what the merits of this case were about.
The merits of the case started back in October of 2021 when Alan Gall had called me and his wife Sarah, and they asked if I could represent them as healthcare power of attorney. They had an uncle by the name of John Zingsheim who had gone into the hospital. This is Aurora Hospital in Waukesha County, and he had been diagnosed with COVID, and they were trying to get ivermectin administered to him, and the hospital refused. They had also talked to Ralph Larigo, an attorney out of New York, and so he became the lead attorney in that particular case, and I was local counsel to it. And as it went on, in a 2-day attorney conference / hearing, basically we were seeking a temporary restraining order, basically an order that would allow John Zingsheim to get the ivermectin. And we were successful in doing that. The court in Waukesha County, the circuit court, granted that in a 2-day process. They revised their order from the first day, which would have had the hospital administering the ivermectin, and in the second day, they revised it and said that Alan Gall could find a doctor who would then administer the correct dosage after directly examining John Zingsheim. And so that order was made. Before the order could be signed, the Second District Appeals Court had taken the case. Aurora had already made a motion to them. And so what they did was they stayed the order. And because they stayed the order, John Zingsheim did not get the ivermectin. And so I had appealed that to the Supreme Court on a bypass and was turned down at the time. And so it went on throughout the next year. And in May of 2022, the appeals court ruled against Alan Gall, and obviously that went against John Zingsheim. And the decision then was basically said that there was no authority for the circuit court to have made that order. And our side obviously has maintained that the court did have authority. And what we very much focused in on was the health care power of attorney statute in our state that we believe gives rights to every citizen in Wisconsin regarding their health care wishes. And if you want, I can read you just a couple of lines that verbatim gives the rights that the legislature gave.
Yes, I will have you do that, and thank you for correcting. I did have a wrong pronunciation here at the start of the program. Alan Gall is the name. So this is the basis then for your argument is what the statutes say. So please share with us that information.
The statute says, notice to person making this document. And of course, that would be the future principal, the one that's executing it, and may need health care in the future. You have the right to make decisions about your health care. No health care may be given to you over your objection, and necessary health care may not be stopped or withheld if you object. And so that is the basis of our argument, was that this was a statutory form that the Wisconsin State Legislature had enacted a number of years ago, and that it carries the force of law, and that there are real rights attached to those words, and that they're not mere suggestions that can be ignored by hospitals. Mm-hmm. And so that's the basis of our argument.
So the hospital, though, they were convinced that Mr. Zingsheim would never be able to return to any kind of livable quality of life, correct?
That's correct, and that speaks to one of the issues, which would be that we discussed, and that would be the necessity of the health care, because obviously that would be something that people could argue about. And one of the areas of necessity would certainly be that if all other help has failed, and in the case of Aurora Hospital, in Alan Gall's affidavit, he had basically stated that the indications that were coming from the hospital, from the doctors and the staff, was that there was no other treatment for Mr. Zingzheim. He was on a ventilator, and there was no other help. They were just talking basically palliative care. So we're talking a person that has no other type of help available to them. And then the other component to necessary would be that the treatment is reasonable. And we believe that it would be reasonable. We were looking at ivermectin, which is a drug that has been around for 40 years and is safe. The literature and the weight of the evidence that is out there has a strong suggestion that this drug will help people and has helped people. And by the way, I would say I believe I'm alive because of that drug. Frankly, that is a drug that my husband got to me when I was in the hospital and very, very ill. So there's different medical people that are disputing it. The narrative that is coming out of the federal government, out of healthcare agencies, local, state, and federal, is that it is not safe, that it's horse-paced. And I would say that's basically a propaganda campaign, and it should be put to rest. We have plenty of doctors out there that are very reputable. Dr. Pierre Corey, to be the lead doctor at FLCCC, Frontline Doctors, that says otherwise and has much proof to back that up with.
Karen, so as these oral arguments were made before the court, just to be clear, this case was not about what treatment for COVID is best, correct?
That's right. I was very clear when we started discussing this in my opening arguments that the court, that we weren't there to decide one drug over another. This was very much about the healthcare power of attorney and about the rights that our legislature had given to citizens of Wisconsin. In fact, I said to the court that I believed that the appeals court's decision had basically gutted that statute, and that the plain meaning analysis that both our Supreme Court of Wisconsin and our federal court goes through in determining what any particular statute means had been disregarded when they went through the process of making this decision. And so that's an issue I think that the court is going to have to look at when they decide this, because they have a lot of jurisprudence, I believe, that has been ignored in the appellate determination that was made.
Okay, so again, to be clear, this case was not about what treatment for COVID is best, and you made that very clear even with your opening statement there. But even though this was not about how to treat COVID, and though the hospital basically is saying, there's all hope is gone in all of this, just trying to give this special care, I see Justice Karofsky, though, actually tore into ivermectin itself.
Yes. Justice Karofsky had questions for me about that, and that was despite the fact that I said we're not really looking at which drug is best here. So everybody can agree or disagree about the efficacy and the safety of that drug. I should say the safety is really not an issue, because even the National Institute of Health, in their Chart E, which you can find on their website, basically they say that it's well tolerated.
I'll tell you what, let's pick up with that, but we're at a break. So let's pick up with that point right afterwards, because this is really important, folks. Again, the National Institutes of Health previously declared ivermectin to be safe. So why would the hospital stop this safe drug from being given? Well, that was part of the argument there as well. We'll be back in just 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, any new dinosaur extinction theories?
Of course, Chris, there's always a new theory. Here's a new one. We all know that methane gas can be deadly at high concentrations. Methane gas is found in gases exuding from deep inside the Earth. It is proposed that a huge methane belch of gas came up from the Earth's mantle, spread out over the land, and killed off all the dinosaurs. Well, that's convenient. That's the kind of theory you can't prove one way or the other. But here's something else to think about. The dead dinosaurs are all found in water-deposited strata. They're not just laying on the surface of the ground having been poisoned by methane gas. They were buried by water. I think it's the Great Flood of Noah's day. That flood may have included a lot of methane, but it was primarily a water flood. That's the evidence we have. It all goes back to Genesis.
Thank you, Dr. John. This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. With us today, Karen Mueller, founder and general counsel for the Amos Center for Justice and Liberty. And friends, patient rights are at stake, and the rights of a healthcare power of attorney. What rights do they hold when you have the clear words of state statute that grant authority, and yet when that authority is denied, how do we interpret things at this point? So there's controversy. It came before the Wisconsin Supreme Court this just a week ago. Karen Mueller, of course, representing in this case Mr. Alan Gall versus the Aurora Healthcare Incorporated. And Karen, just as we're going to the break, we were talking about the National Institutes of Health and the big controversy, as we mentioned, Justice Karofsky kind of tearing into this ivermectin, and yet we see that the hospital refused to give the requested medication because it was beneath their standard of care. But the National Institutes of Health, you were just pointing out, really previously declared ivermectin to be safe. I believe there was even a Nobel Peace Prize won on behalf of this medication.
That's absolutely true. The NIH, their chart 2E, which we had in evidence, basically said that ivermectin, regarding its safety, is well tolerated because, and as you said, it's won a Nobel Prize. On the other hand, the drug that is given to almost every patient in this country that goes in for COVID, because of the COVID-19 protocols that comes out of the federal government, that drug is remdesivir. And on that same chart I just mentioned, remdesivir, it talks about the toxicity to both the liver and to the kidneys. And this is a drug that has been experimental in nature, at the very least when they first started giving it in 2020, and I believe that it has caused the deaths of tens of thousands of people in this country, and I do not understand why the COVID-19 protocols are still being used in this country in these hospitals. In fact, I believe that it has the standards of care, or I should say the COVID-19 protocols have really been masquerading as standards of care, and that needs to stop. That was somewhat of an issue in this case. The hospital maintained from the very beginning of this case that courts have no authority to intervene if they say that a treatment falls beneath their standard of care for patient safety.
Well,
that cannot be.
Yeah, and this is something that Justice Dallett was pointing out and saying, well, if the hospital says this is beneath their standard of care, how can we as a court then know what is better as it pertains to standard of care? How can we come in and say, hospital, that's beneath your standard of care, but we as a court know better?
Well, again, the issue that was before them had to do with the healthcare power of attorney. And we proved, I believe, with the NIH chart alone and a lot of other evidence that had been entered, that the drug was safe and that we had a man that was in dire circumstances. And based on that, that goes back to the necessity issue within the legislator's words. And for that reason, according to the Wisconsin state legislature, that health care since we could determine that it would be necessary, should not have been withheld because the family was objecting, in particular Alan Gall, who was the healthcare agent. He was before the court on that basis. That is the reason he even had the ability to knock on the courthouse door, was because he was the healthcare power of attorney. And that is what, in fact, gave him the standing to come into the courthouse and ask, so to speak.
We should also mention, what is the present condition of Mr. Zingsheim, whom Alan Gall was the medical power of attorney over?
He is now home. He did survive. He had 10 months in the hospital, which should have never happened, but thank God he's alive. It was basically a miracle. And I will say it is my understanding now that somebody did get ivermectin to him in a lotion form.
Karen, this is a very interesting situation because here we have, again, a standard of care came up repeatedly, and when we find that, as it relates to standard of care, that the hospital was giving the remdesivir, which have pointed out the harmful effects it's had upon so many. As a matter of fact, I believe this had been pulled some decades ago when it was found to cause ill treatment of patients, and yet a proven drug that has shown not to cause harm was refused, saying no, that's below their standard of care. It just seems rather oxymoronic as it relates to even how we define standard of care, because one seems to have hastened the death of some, according to your arguments, and another has been life-affirming.
That is correct. I mean, if something seems rather odd here, it's because there is something, I believe, that is very disturbing that is going on in our country. The COVID-19 protocols are coming out of Medicare, Medicaid, and CMS. And that would be the government, our United States government, telling every hospital what they should do for a patient that they have never laid eyes on, they have never seen. Basically, the argument that was being made by one doctor who had never seen Mr. Zingsheim but had ordered a prescription, I can make that argument on a national level. And that is that the people who made these protocols and are forcing these terribly dangerous drugs on people, they've never laid eyes on them. They've never examined their chart. And so it's a one-size-fits-all dangerous drug that Anthony Fauci has decided is to be used throughout our country. And I say it's killing people, and it needs to stop. It needs to stop today because people are still dying. The families that have contacted me, the families that have contacted that are my clients, have suffered greatly. Most of the people that I have been in touch with have been traumatized because their loved ones died alone, their loved ones died on ventilators, and they were isolated from their loved ones. This is horrific, and this needs to stop today.
You know, I am aware of individuals who, even while hospitalized, would request something simple like a vitamin C, and hospitals drag their feet, or in some cases, not willing to administer even vitamin C or D or zinc or those types of things. I mean, that's outrageous. And I know in one particular case where a doctor says, well, after repeated requests by the patient, the doctor says, well, I guess we don't know that it's going to be of any benefit or help, but it's not going to harm you, so we'll allow it to happen. I mean, how far are we going to take this? That's vitamin C.
Yes, that happened over and over again. In addition to that, basic things such as water, hydration, have been withheld from many patients. So there's no water, no food in many cases. this is beyond outrageous. What we're talking about is basically people that are, let's just say it's far beyond medical malpractice here. Because we're 3 years into this, and people know better, and people are watching these people die, and it needs to stop. In fact, I would urge any people that are working in these hospitals, and whether it's doctors, nurses, respiratory therapists, whatever, this needs to stop. One thing that I think is very important for people, if they can go back and watch the hearing, is that the hospital, Aurora, maintained that it was their doctors making the decisions. And that is far from the truth based on what I've heard from many, many families, because there were many doctors that said, I would have given the ivermectin, but I would lose my job.
Wow.
Now, that's outrageous.
Yeah.
And that is the truth. And so I know you have a national audience. This is going on all over the country. And people, healthcare workers, need to rise up, and they need to become whistleblowers, if nothing else. This needs to stop today.
Karen, I know this goes back again, full circle back to the statutory form for the power of attorney, and this was passed by through the legislature, the power of attorney aspect here, and how can we get away from what the words actually say?
Well, I would respectfully say that the appeals court erred in this case. Mm-hmm. And because they erred, this has to be corrected by the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and I'm confident that they will do that. That's regarding our statute. I can't speak to statutes in other states because the states are the ones that enact their own health care power of attorneys.
Just a couple more questions, and we'll be opening some phone lines here. But I noticed Justice Hagedorn seemed kind of troubled that he could not find where the trial court had recited law in granting permission for a doctor to come to the hospital and administer the drug. What's your response to that? Should that trouble us?
It's in the statute. Again, I simply go back to the fact that Wisconsin Statute 155.30 is the healthcare power of attorney statute, and it grants those rights that I read to every person in Wisconsin. If it doesn't grant those rights, then the legislature should have written "just kidding" behind them, because I think the words that no health care may be given to you over your objection, and necessary health care may not be stopped or withheld if you object is very clear. And so that is the plain meaning of the statute. I can read. Every person that is listening can read. So you look at the statute and you go, I don't get this. The fact, again, that it was Alan Gall that showed up, so to speak, at the courthouse and asked for this help in getting a drug that was being withheld from his uncle that he believed would help him and that was safe. He had every right to do that under this section of the law. In fact, that is what gives him the standing to go in the courthouse doors, so to speak.
Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Karen Mueller is with us, the founder and general counsel for Amos Center for Justice and Liberty. Their website, amoscenterforjustice.org, amoscenterforjustice.org. I've just got another question or two. We'll be opening up some phone lines shortly as well, so stay with us. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
How much do you know about the end of the world? Have you heard of worldwide pandemics? weapons of mass destruction, threats from Russia and Asia, clamor for globalization, hand implants for commerce and security, violent persecution. What about intensifying wickedness? All of this is predicted in the book of Revelation. In the book, The 50 Final Events in World History, author Robert Morgan simplifies what many have found complex, providing a comprehensive yet easy-to-understand overview of the book of Revelation, which translates the events of Revelation both literally and sequentially. Walk step by step through the prophetic events yet to unfold. The 50 Final Events in World History is available from VCY for a donation of $18 or more when you call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk, Patient Rights at Stake. With us today, Karen Mueller, founder and general counsel for the Amos Center for Justice and Liberty. Karen, I can just imagine the number of phone calls that are coming in to your offices from people around this country and even the state experiencing similar matters. I can only imagine the costs that have been escalating in giving such representation for this very issue.
It has been very costly, and I would say the Amos Center is surviving on donations. And by the way, Amos Center is only 2.5 years old. I started it as a public interest, not-for-profit law firm in the wake of the pandemic, or I should say when it started, and seeing all the trampling of our constitutional and civil rights taking place. And, of course, everything just escalated. The needs got worse and worse. And so, frankly, the Amos Center could use donations. We are going to be having dinner benefits that we are going to be holding around the state in the next couple of months. Our first one is coming up February 4th at Lilydale Event Center in Chippewa Falls, where we are located. The people should know that the tickets are $100 a person, and that is because this is our only way to do fundraising, and I need to be able to hire more staff, more attorneys. We are looking at strategic litigation, not only on this end, we are looking at it for the people that have lost loved ones and have been injured in the hospitals with these protocols. We are also looking at representing a number of people who have been injured by the so-called vaccines. And then we are also looking at having to fight this new front that has been opened with the unborn. And so we do need resources, financial resources, so that I can expand the number of attorneys that we have on staff. I can live with very little myself, but I understand that young attorneys with a lot more energy than I have, they need to support their families. And so what I would ask your listeners, too, if they are interested in giving anything, that would be greatly appreciated. And they can do that at amoscenterforjustice.org. If you are interested in getting tickets for this first dinner, we have a button on the website where you can register for the Every Life Matters Legal Offense Fund dinner.
Okay. Again, that's amoscenterforjustice.org, and you can look for the button Every Life Matters.
Yes.
Very good.
And that is for the tickets. Otherwise, we have a regular donate button.
Friends, our phone number to Crosstalk today is 800-733-9829. That's 1-800-733-9829. Your questions for our guest today. Karen, let me ask you this. What really is at stake in this case?
People's lives all over this country. This isn't going to stop, that at least is my opinion, until enough people stand up and make it stop. We have people in our federal government, some in our state, that are determined for any number of reasons. I would zero in on financial gain to change the way that medical care is given. And I believe that there's some people that are considered more worthy, more acceptable, and that goes with a philosophy that completely goes against the Christian philosophy of every life mattering because it's a gift from God. Frankly, we're talking about evil here. And there's people that are in places of power that need to be removed from power. And in our situation, if we don't have legal enforcement, if we can't find a way to investigate them, then as far as I'm concerned, we are going to have to find a way to make them care. And one way is through strategic litigation.
Karen, is there any indication when the justices will render their decision?
That is hard to predict. Okay. I really don't have a sense of when it will be. They will do their work, and they will make their decision based on the evidence. I'm confident of that, and on the briefing. And I think that they will come up with the just decision. AmosCenterForJustice.org is the website. And we'll take your phone calls. Lines are packed here today on Crosstalk. And let's begin with Dominique calling from Mukwonago, Wisconsin. Good afternoon, Dominique.
Good afternoon, Jim and Karen. I just wanted to see if it was all right with you if I read one section of quotes. It's like a minute long.
Yes, I'm going to have you do that, Dominic. I just want to thank you for calling. You just actually wrote an article for The New American that's available at thenewamerican.com that really is a wonderful overview of what's taken place. So let me commend you on that, Dominique, but also encourage listeners to go to thenewamerican.com, and you'll see the headline, Rights of the Patient Under Fire in Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Thank you, Jim. That is very kind. Praise the Lord. So I was just wanting to say that it was, just in this clip here, notice it was more important to the hospital to preserve their precious protocol than to preserve John's one truly precious life, memorialized in this exchange between Justice Rebecca Bradley asking Aurora's hospital attorney, Jason Frankowiak, I believe is how you say his name, and she says, quote, "It's important to define what is the status quo. The doctors at the hospital basically said, there's nothing more we can do. We'll keep him on a ventilator. The other side is saying, look, he has a right to try. So what is the status quo from your perspective? And then the attorney answered, we would take the position that the status quo was that Mr. Zingsheim was being treated by a team of 4 different specialties, 24 hours per day, under a protocol that the treatment team had decided. And that treatment plan did not include ivermectin. So when the judge actually made his decision in this case and initially granted the injunction, he was actually not preserving the status quo. He was actually actively upsetting the status quo. The treatment team was now being required to administer ivermectin and a change in the treatment plan. And then this is when Justice Rebecca Bradley states, quote, that's disrupting the status quo for Aurora, but it's not disrupting the status quo for Mr. Zingsheim, who is trying to live, right? The status quo for him was he was alive, and they were trying to keep him alive, unquote. And there is the power of the right to life.
Well, very powerful exchange. Thank you, Dominique. Karen, let me get your response.
I think that's right on point. It was certainly one of the points that we were making that you have to make when you're asking the court for a TRO, and that is that you are maintaining the status quo. And we can't even imagine a situation where the status quo of maintaining a person's life is that priority, that something else takes greater priority over maintaining life. That is so far outside of not only our Christian worldview, but the American worldview. our Wisconsin Constitution is clear, and it says that we have a right to life, and that governments are instituted to secure those rights. You can't get any plainer than that. That's the Wisconsin Constitution. And so, every branch of government is there to secure our rights to life, to liberty, and to the pursuit of happiness, according to our Wisconsin Constitution.
Dominique, thank you for the call.
You're welcome.
And friends, again, you'll find the article giving a great overview on this at thenewamerican.com. Let's go to Linda calling from Sardinia, Ohio. Linda, you're on the air.
Hello, yes. In Sardinia, where I've lived over these past year, 2 years, whatever, I don't know how many friends of mine have died because they got slapped in the hospital on a ventilator, period. And a lot of my family has died, too. And even after my family, after they got the shots, they died. Anyway, I'm with the rest. This needs to stop. And this...
Oh, I think we just lost our caller here. Thank you for the call. Just got disconnected from you. Let me just say this. Lord willing, tomorrow on Crosstalk, we're scheduled to be joined by Dr. Elizabeth Lee Valette, and we'll be dealing more on the medical side of things. Right now we're talking about certainly the legal end of things and the right of patients, the right of one's medical power of attorney here in this case as well. We've got Tom calling in from McConnellsville, Ohio. Hi, Tom. You're on the air.
Hi, and thank you for taking my call. My question is, a friend of mine had Parkinson's, and in order for him to see his sister who came down with the virus in Montana, he had to get the vaccine in order to fly out there on the flight. And he had the Moderna, and that was a year ago, but in that year, the Parkinson's has taken him down to a walker. So I'm wondering, are the vaccines affecting illnesses that people already have? And the other question is we both then came down with the COVID, and is the infusion safe? Is there any side effects from the infusions that you can take?
Yeah, and thank you. And these are more from the medical perspective, but Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, and I wanted to say that I'm not a medical doctor, so you may want to ask especially that last question from Dr. Lee Valette tomorrow when she is going to be on. But what I will tell you is my understanding from a number of doctors that I've talked to is what the vaccines do overall is they suppress the immunity. And so if you already have a pre-existing condition, whether that is neurological or even any type of a previous cancer and possibly a cardiac problem, then it's going to be worse. But I also understand that you don't have to have any of those pre-existing conditions to end up with problems because of these so-called vaccines. They're anything but vaccines. And the information that is continuing to come out shows that we have severe problems that are going to be coming down in the coming years with this. But I think overall I would defer to Dr. Valette, who's going to be on tomorrow, to speak more to that.
On the medical side, thank you so much for the call. Christine in Racine, you're on the air.
I would like Karen to please give her website again because I came in late, but I've tried to get information for a long time, and the Epoch Times has been a profound resource to show every doctor with the highest credentials in the world who oppose it and why, from a medical standpoint. But I want to understand if you're seeing the people who call themselves Christians who refuse to go along and look and really research the data and the evidence, who will still toe the line with the medical establishment. And these are Christian people who are in the medical field. What on earth is going on, and what resource do you think would be wise to present to them? I've given them enough, I feel, but I feel I need to stop.
Okay, thank you, Christine. We are up against a break. We'll have our guest comment afterwards and give her website again as well. So, folks, be ready to jot it down. Back in just 1 minute here on Crosstalk.
For
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewreport.com. Last Friday, I did something I've been wanting to do for many, many years, but just never took the time to do. I was speaking in the Nashville, Tennessee area, and I finally got to do it, and that is visit the home of President Andrew Jackson, the Hermitage. I find him to be a fascinating historical individual. He was our 7th president of the United States. In my book, Grave Influence, that I wrote in 2008 and came out in 2009, I gave a segment of his farewell address in which he warned about a central bank. As president, he did away with a central bank and warned America to never get a central bank ever again. That the bankers, due to their greed and corruption, would expand the money supply when it suited them and then contract it when it would protect their assets, having a ruinous effect upon America. He warned to never do this. We didn't listen. We got the Federal Reserve in 1913, and now look at where we're at. I'm Brandon House.
Karen Mueller is our guest here today on Crosstalk, founder and general counsel for the Amos Center for Justice and Liberty. And again, their website, AmosCenterForJustice.org. For is spelled out F-O-R, AmosCenterForJustice.org. The caller was also asking about additional sites. I don't know. Again, I think dealing with more things on a medical perspective. Dr. Vliet will be with us tomorrow, and her site, truthforhealth.org. Anything else you want to share, Karen, to that last caller?
What I would say is if you go to our website, AmosCenterForJustice.org, you will find a lot of information. We have recently revamped the website, and you will find probably more information than you care to read on a lot of different subjects, but particularly on the vaccine injuries, also on the COVID-19 protocol injuries and deaths, and also on miscarriages and a variety of other topics, but those are the main 3. I wanted to answer the question of your previous caller. She's wondering what is going on and how this is all working. And what I would say is I have very strong evidence to show that there is a concerted propaganda campaign that has come out of the federal government through HHS, and that they have had many, I'm talking thousands of organizations that they had joined their propaganda campaign, and I believe there's evidence that those organizations were paid to incentivize the vaccines. And by incentivizing, I'm talking about money that was handed out to them, and many different organizations, nonprofits, state and local agencies that received some kind of stipend, at the very least. And so they all ended up talking about the efficacy and the safety of these shots, when both of those are a lie. They are absolutely a lie. And people need to wake up and do their research. And she spoke about Christians, and I would just say the time right now is to wake up and do your homework and really research this. And a good jumping off point is our website. And then again, you'll hear Dr. Valet tomorrow.
William is calling from Fountain Hill, Arizona. You're on the air.
Well, thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it. I really want to say I appreciate this guest and what she's having to say. I think she's absolutely right. What she's concluding is going on here. And I was going to share my own personal witness of what happened to me at the hospital last January. A leading hospital in Phoenix, the largest hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm on Medicare. And I checked into triage. I was sent to the emergency room by my Medicare supplement nurses that RN that we call, and they She immediately called the ambulance.
Yeah, William, we're going to have you speed it up because we're down to just a couple minutes in the broadcast.
Here's my point. They not only did not perform any services for me, Medicare declined the services, and, of course, that affects the hospital because they won't get any Medicare payments at all. So that's what's going on. They're trying to shut us old folks down. That's what they're trying to do.
Well, any comment, Karen?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. The protocols are very dark. You go in, you get a test, and whether you're actually positive for COVID, they start you on the remdesivir after a few days, and you might have some other drugs that are at least as harmful, such as baricitinib. Within a few days, you need a ventilator. Once you're on the ventilator, I have one client who said that the doctor told her, if you want to see your mom alive again, you'll sign the DNR orders. And so basically, she was going to die either way. It was a matter of if they were going to allow the mom to see her. That was a real live living person, and they have family that have this unbelievable loss. But I would want to say before we end that there's even a darker side beyond this, and that's that we have evidence in certain cases. I've had people call me from around the country that there is active euthanasia going on, and we have, of course, the prominent case, I believe you've had him on, Scott Shera, who is the father of Grace, the 19-year-old woman who had Down syndrome. And he maintains that she was murdered by the hospital and because of the illegal DNR orders. And so that case, I believe, is probably going to be litigated. I'm not the attorney in that, and so I'm not going to speak any more to that. But I also have had calls where they basically said their loved ones were overdosed on fentanyl, on morphine, drugs that they had no business receiving. They just plain weren't required, and even a layperson, such as myself, can see that there was no good reason for that.
Let me just squeeze in Jim from Milwaukee. Jim, you have about 30 seconds.
Yes, I was in a VA hospital in Milwaukee, and they refused me ivermectin and refused vitamins. And when my wife begged them on the phone to give me vitamins, they wouldn't. She had to sneak them up in a bag of a care package for me in a bag of underwear, and they didn't even want me to move out of my bed. They wanted me to just stay there and don't move. They said, reserve your energy. We don't want you to get up, and
Tell you what, we're going to have to stop you right there. Karen, final comment here.
Well, I appreciate you interviewing me, having me on today to be able to speak to this issue. Right now, we'll be waiting to see what the Supreme Court of Wisconsin says on our health care power of attorney statute. For us in Wisconsin, the citizens need to know whether what the legislature enacts is real and that they can depend on that. If they become sick and are in the situation where they need a healthcare agent to speak for them. But the larger issue is what is going on across this country with the COVID-19 protocols, and this needs to stop.
Well, we are out of time. Karen, thank you for being with us. Amos Center for Justice.org, amoscenterforjustice.org. Thanks for joining us today on Crosstalk.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.